The Notebook of Doom. Attack of the Shadow Smashers. Chapter 1, Cleanup Crew. KER Smash. The 60-story slime creature knocked over another skyscraper. That's one scary monster, huh, Al? Said Alexander's dad. Alexander Bop yawned. It's a neat comic, but I wouldn't call Swamp Yak scary. Are you nuts? His dad said. He's got 7 eyes. And lightning breath. Sorry, Dad, said Alexander. But Swamp Yak is silly. He slips on a bowling ball and falls into a volcano. The end. A real monster would be way smarter than that. Alexander's dad laughed. Oh, Al. You take this monster stuff too seriously. Alexander was serious about monsters ever since he had moved to Stermont. The town was crawling with them. Real, scary monsters, not the kinds you find in comic books. All right, kiddo. You can go play outside, said Alexander's dad. Thanks, Dad. Alexander yelled as he shot out the door and into the woods. He followed a footpath to an old caboose. The train car was the hideout of the super-secret Monster Patrol, which was also known as the SSMP. The SSMP was a group of kids who fought monsters. This group had fallen apart years ago, but Alexander had restarted it after being attacked by monsters. Alexander climbed into the caboose. There was stuff everywhere: papers, boxes, flashlights, ice skates, a saxophone, a birdcage, a globe, a cheese grater, and a basket of ping-pong balls. In other words, everything you might need to fight a monster. In the middle of this mess sat Rip and Nikki, the only other members of the SSMP. Sorry I'm late, said Alexander. How's the cleanup going? Great, said Nikki. I've been organizing all of our gear. And I drew this awesome picture of me fighting balloon goons at your leap year birthday party, said Rip. And look! Here's me sword fighting the fish kebab monster. Sheesh. Nikki said, whipping a ping-pong ball at Rip. You didn't defeat those monsters single-handed, you know. Fine, he said. I'll add you to the picture. And Salamander. Salamander was Alexander's nickname. He was almost used to it. Oh, and check this out. Rip said. He tossed something curved and white to Alexander. It was a jawbone. With fangs. Nikki's eyes grew wide. Alexander studied the fangs. Rip whistled. Those are some serious choppers. This jawbone must have come from a super evil monster. Evil? Said Nikki, sinking into her hoodie. Alexander snapped his fingers. I know this monster, he said. Alexander unzipped his backpack and pulled out the official SSMP notebook. He had found it on his first day in Stermont. He never went anywhere without it. Alexander thumbed through the monster-filled pages. I remember seeing a long-toothed monster that N.O. Nikki shouted. She tore some pages from Alexander's notebook. Then Nikki ran out of the caboose without saying a word. Alexander closed the notebook. What was that about? He asked. Rip shrugged. AL, shouted a voice. Gotta run, said Alexander. Dad's taking me shopping for clothes. Oh, yeah, tomorrow's picture day, said Rip. He flexed his arms. I should practice my poses. Alexander shook his head. Chapter 2, I see London, I see France. Alexander hiked up his pants and looked in the fitting room mirror. I look like a rodeo clown, thought Alexander. His dad peeked in through the curtain and smiled. Now those are some snappy slacks. Alexander groaned. Can't we just buy the plain black suit? Sure, Al, suit yourself, said his dad. I'll go pick out some ties. Alexander closed the curtain. Then he froze. Something in the mirror had moved. A cold draft tickled his back, as if someone had forgotten to close the fridge. "Dad?" he asked, peeking over his shoulder. "Is that you?" The curtain was still closed. Alexander looked back at the mirror. His eyes were bugging out. His nose was twitching. And his mustache was drooping. Mustache? Alexander blinked. Wait, it was just a shadow under his nose. The shadow wiggled. "It's swaying," he thought, like the tail of he gasped a giant snake. The shadowy snake slithered across the mirror, ready to strike. Ack! Alexander leaped backward, right out of his pants. And right out of the fitting room. He crashed into a rack of belts. "I found a tie," said Alexander's dad, strolling into view. He lowered an eyebrow. Alexander looked down. A bright yellow cartoon crane smiled up at him. He was wearing his Stanley the Steam Shovel underpants in the middle of the store. Alexander's knees wobbled. His dad chuckled as he pulled open the fitting room curtain. "Let's get you back into your big boy pants." Alexander slowly stepped back inside. There was no sign of the snake shadow. Did I see a monster? Alexander wondered. Or was that snake thing just a trick of the light? Alexander got dressed and followed his dad to the checkout counter. Snakes, eels, a leech, maybe? He muttered to himself as he flipped through the monster notebook. Coo rock. A screech leech's cry. Sounds like a duck playing a broken kazoo. Screech leech, a long purple three-eyed leech. Habitat, found in closets, they blend in with the belts and neckties. Diet, chipmunks, preferably with barbecue sauce. Behavior, these bloodsuckers scream when they're hungry. Warning! When you're near a closet, never act like a chipmunk. Alexander closed the notebook. Could that thing in the fitting room have been Screech Leech? He thought. I'll have to see what Rip and Nikki think tomorrow at school. Chapter 3, Photo NONO. Alexander fiddled with his tie as he hurried to the old hospital. Actually, it wasn't a hospital. It was where he went to school while the new Stermont Elementary building was being built. But today, as he stepped inside, he saw that it wasn't a hospital or a school. It was a cornfield. A fake cornfield. There was a fake wooden fence, a fake wagon wheel, and a row of fake corn with a beautiful fake sunset. There was even a fake scarecrow behind the camera. Wait. It wasn't a scarecrow, it was Mr. Horsley. To most kids, he was the school secretary, but Alexander, Rip, and Nikki knew him as a member of the original SSMP. Alexander, you're late, said Mr. Horsley. Alexander's classmates were lined up behind the wagon wheel. Alexander wondered how long they'd been holding their poses. Sorry, Alexander said. He took a spot between Rip and Nikki. About time, Salamander, said Rip. He wore a clip-on tie, and it looked like someone had even tried to comb his hair this morning. Quiet down, please, said Mr. Horsley. Guys, Alexander whispered, I saw a monster yesterday. Really? Cool, said Rip. Oh, said Nikki. She hadn't dressed up for picture day. Nikki, said Alexander. Is something wrong? Nikki pulled her hood down to her eyebrows. I'm just not big on photos, she said. I hear you, said Rip. It must be hard to be in a picture with a good-looking guy like me. Nikki groaned. Smile, everyone, said Mr. Horsley. Everyone smiled. Actually, not quite everyone. You, too, Nikki, said Mr. Horsley. Nikki didn't smile. Mr. Horsley sighed. Maybe you could eat. He tripped on his tripod as a mean-looking woman pushed her way through the corn. It was Principal Vanderpants. Nikki, she said. Would you be so kind as to smile for 1/100th of a second so Mr. Horsley can photograph your class? Nikki tightened her lips. She looked like she had swallowed a bug. No good, said Ms. Vanderpants, shaking her head. Smile, Nikki. Nikki bared her teeth. Her smile was wide and bright. But two of her teeth were extra long. And pointy. A second later, she snapped her mouth shut. Click! Alexander blinked. Chapter 4, Red in the Face. Rip. We have to talk, said Alexander. He ran to the lunch line, where Rip was getting a tray. Hey, said Rip. Look. For once, I am not grossed out by lunch. Although I can't say I'm thrilled about the rest of the week. Forget the menu, said Alexander. Have you noticed anything strange about Nikki? Rip took a plate of chicken fingers. Like how she ripped those pages from the notebook yesterday? No, not that, said Alexander. Well, maybe that. He spoke quietly. Nikki has fangs, Rip. Oh, geez, said Rip, grinning. There's no way Nikki's got fangs. Alexander frowned. But I saw. Hey, guys, said Nikki, stepping in between them. I saved us a spot. Alexander followed Rip and Nikki to a table. So, Salamander, said Nikki. She punched a straw into a juice box. Tell us about this monster you saw yesterday. Alexander hadn't noticed it before, but Nikki barely moved her lips when she talked. He couldn't get a good look at her teeth. Well, he said. I was trying on pants, when dash. Gross! Rip yelled, pointing his chicken finger at Nikki. What are you doing? Bloop! B-L-O-P. Nikki was pouring tons of ketchup all over her plate. What? She asked. Rip made a face. I was hoping to make it through lunch without gagging. Nikki drowned a tiny nugget of chicken in her lake of ketchup. Then she ate it. A drop of red rolled down her chin. Alexander stared at Nikki. So, anyway, maybe it was just a shadow, but I think I saw a snake monster. Or a leech. A leech, said Rip. Blood-sucking monsters are the worst. With their fangs and... Enough! Nikki shouted. She grabbed her juice box and splish. Sprayed Rip in the face. Then she stomped out of the cafeteria. What did I say? Asked Rip, dripping with cherry punch. Alexander handed Rip a napkin. I'm not sure, he said. But you should probably wash up. Rip headed to the bathroom. As Alexander nibbled a chicken finger, he noticed a strange shadow along one wall. It was shaped like a sledgehammer. The hammer shadow rose up as Rip walked by, and then it silently smashed down right onto Rip's own shadow. Rip shivered a moment.